Notice just how much more story Oda was able to tell in the past 100 chapters in comparison to the 100 chapters that preceded these? Each chapter now has a lot more story content, and the story itself is moving at an insanely fast pace. Which brings us back to the same old question. When is One Piece gonna end? How much of the story is still left to be told? I'll give you the short answer right now. As many fans already agree, the story's gonna end around chapter 1200, which means that these next 100 chapters are basically Oda's last sprint to the finish line. Though before we continue talking about this, I just want you to press that naughty like and also that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow, which is, of course, always appreciated. Just do it! And let the algorithm know that you like One Piece just as much as I do. Alright, so as I was saying, One Piece is already in its endgame. In Oda's own words, the final saga has already begun, and considering the current pacing, it's not unreasonable to think that Oda can finish the story with chapter 1200. Now the next question is, how is Oda planning on finishing the story in just the next 100 chapters? Especially when you consider how Wano alone is way longer than 100 chapters, so how can the final war not be as long? The thing is, most of the background work for the endgame has already been done. We know Elbaf is the next arc, where the Straw Hats will most likely get the final Road Poneglyph. We have Vegapunk on our side, the Revolutionary Army is finally getting some relevance, and let's not forget that Blackbeard wasn't just sitting on his ass these past few arcs. He may not have been as active as the Straw Hats, but he has also been on the grind, and he's committed his fair share of felonies. In the cover story of chapter 1064, we saw Van Augur and Aokiji abducting Pudding from Totoland. They must have also stolen Big Mom's Poneglyph. Or maybe Blackbeard just took them from Law. Not to mention the third parties like Buggy and Shanks. Buggy has become a foil to the world government, and he's the reason they can never go back to the same all-powerful organization that people put their faith in. And Shanks must also be up to something, right? Oda has already laid out all the context. We pretty much only need the God Valley flashback and the Void Century flashback, but that's about it. Think about it this way. Marineford War was only 30 chapters. But it was in the works since we saw Ace in Alabasta. The endgame of One Piece is the same, but obviously on a much larger scale. Keep in mind that Oda doesn't need to add more context, he just has to reveal the missing pieces of the puzzle like the full breadth of the God Valley flashback as well as what happened over 800 years ago. At that point, the only mystery remaining would be the actual treasure called One Piece. Though it'd be interesting to see how long the upcoming flashbacks are going to be. Like we know, Oden's flashback was 15 chapters, but Oda had been adding pinches of context since Punk Hazard. Oda did the same thing with Kuma's flashback. It's not as long as Oden's flashback, but because the context has been there since Sabaody, it's more about finishing it up than laying it out. See, One Piece can very reasonably end in chapter 1200. Most of the mysteries are interconnected. The God Valley flashback and the Void Century flashback are going to explain pretty much everything that is left to be explained. And then it's all about the final war, which could last 50 chapters. Though it's also worth mentioning that One Piece has averaged 30 to 40 chapters a year for the past few years. So if it's going to end with chapter 1200, that's like 3 more years. And just last year, Oda said that the story is going to end within 3 years. But let's also keep in mind that he's going to draw the greatest battle in the history of One Piece. Like, bigger than Oginashima, Marineford, the God Valley incident, and whatever happened during the Void Century. So yeah. Now let's talk about the counter scenario. What if One Piece goes on for a little longer than 1200 chapters? What then? Guys, let me tell you that this would make a hell of a difference. A stupid amount of story was told in the past 50 or so chapters. But it's also clear that Oda's been off-screening some stuff. Take Kuma's flashback for example. It makes Dragon look like an incompetent bum. But that's mostly because he's been getting glossed over every time we see him. Why not pause and properly lay out his character for us? That'll take too long. And One Piece can easily go on for another 10 years if the chapters aren't as condensed and rich as they are. But if Oda calms down and lets the story go on for, let's say, 1250 to 1300 chapters, it'll make one hell of a difference. Of course, that would also mean another 2 to 3 years added to the schedule, so there's that. This is why the next 100 chapters are going to be much more soaked and saturated than the previous 100. I don't see Elbaf being longer than Egghead Island, but I do think that Elbaf is where we may get the God Valley flashback. Shanks is there after all. The final Road Poneglyph is also there, probably, and because Elbaf is the most anti-world government country, it's a good place to debunk some of their propaganda. As for the Void Century flashback, we're probably gonna get it after the Straw Hats reach Laugh Tale and find the One Piece. Then you have two major battles, the final war and the battle with the Blackbeard pirates. It's going to be interesting to see which one takes place when. Maybe Blackbeard will fight Luffy for the One Piece. And then the final war happens after that? It's a bit tricky because Blackbeard versus Luffy should be the greatest one-on-one in One Piece. But then you also have the final war, which will of course be against the world government. Now, some fans can argue that Blackbeard and Luffy may team up against the world government after fighting each other, but I can assure you that this will never happen. Just like how Luffy didn't share the spotlight with Kid and Law while fighting Kaido. He's going to topple the world government by himself with his crew. The revolutionaries and other pirate crews will play a role, but personally, Blackbeard is definitely going to be the best One Piece antagonist till the end. It doesn't matter what Emu or Akainu try to do, they're not going to top Blackbeard. Overall, what do you guys think? Do you think One Piece is going to end somewhere around chapter 1200, or do you disagree? Honestly, we're talking about the final chapter to be exactly chapter 1200. It's a story, not arithmetic after all, so I'd say somewhere between chapter 1200 and 1250 is the best bet. By the way, the One Piece manga often has 11 chapters per volume. The latest volume at the writing of this chapter is volume 107, which ends with chapter 1088. So you can argue that One Piece may end with volume 120, which would be around chapter 1230 or something. Of course, I'm interested in your thoughts as well. Let's continue this discussion in the comments section down below. And guys, remember to kick that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed the video. It's always appreciated. And well then, with that said, I'll see y'all in the next video. じゃあね。